The night the HOA president stepped into my living room without knocking, something in me finally clicked into place like a deadbolt I should have thrown years ago. I was standing by the kitchen sink, rinsing a coffee mug I've had since my father's last fishing trip. The porch light threw a yellow cone across the gravel. It was one of those still evenings on the edge of towns, cadaz buzzing, the flag on the pole barely stirring, the lake whispering just beyond the pines. My wife, Maggie, was in the den, stitching a tear in our grandson's Little League cap. We were quiet, comfortable, home. The front door swung open like a bar saloon in an old movie. No knock, no hello, just footsteps, brisk and cheap perfume, bold. Marla Pierce, the HOA president, marched in with a clipboard against her chest, and two men behind her holding phones high like torches. "You owe," she announced, sharp enough to slice the room in half. 6 years of unpaid assessments. Late fees, legal fees, trash can violations, flag violations, holiday decor, outside regulation dates. Total, $18,412. Maggie stood up, needles still threaded. "Ma'am, you can't just—" Marla ignored her and pointed past my shoulder, toward the mantel where Dad's folded burial flag sits between a faded photo of the old house and a dip jar full of quarters. "You were warned that oversized displays require prior HOA authorization." I set my mug in the sink, slow enough to keep from breaking it. "That flag isn't oversized," I said. "It's a funeral triangle. It's my father's. And this house predates your HOA by 32 years. We opted out. You have that in writing?" Click. The phones in the men's hands kept recording. One of them smirked at my boots by the mat, wet from checking the north fence line. Marla felt more confident with her audience. "You ignored certified letters. You parked your truck too close to the curb. You installed a security light visible from the street without a form. And you refused to pay the special snow removal assessment." "It's July," I said. She lifted her chin. "The snow fund is evergreen." I could taste metal in my mouth, that old temps of anger I try to avoid. "See, my family built on this land when the town was a stop sign and a sandwich shop. I've kept things simple. Fix fences, mow straight lines, wave at neighbors, mind my business. I don't like trouble. I like breakfast before sunrise and the sound of Maggie's radio in the garden. But there's a line between neighborly and nonsense." And Marla stepped over it the moment she crossed my threshold. "Get off my property," I said. "You're trespassing." Actually, she snapped back, almost triumphant. "Per Section 1-C, HOA officers may enter to photograph violations. You've got an illegal addition, the side porch, plus an unapproved shed by the east tree line." I moved toward the doorway. Not fast, not slow. "This is private property. You were told by me and by council that this parcel isn't under your jurisdiction." She smiled in a way that told me this wasn't about a porch or a shed. This was about control. About getting me to bend a knee the way the new folks did when they moved in and wanted to be good neighbors. Which around here too often means handing the keys to people who never swung a hammer. "You think a deed makes you special?" She said. "I've placed a lien. We'll auction if needed." I heard the floorboard creak behind me, the soft step from the hallway. "Everything all right?" The voice was calm, deep. The voice of a man who carries quiet authority like a well-worn coat. I turned. "Evening, Judge," I said. "Now I don't advertise what I do. Folks around here know me as the man with the old dog and the green F-150. They don't need my resume. And I don't need to puff my chest. But for the last couple of weeks, my brother-in-law, technically my wife's cousin, had been staying in our guest room while he presided over a visiting docket in the district 2 counties over. He likes my porch coffee and Maggie's peach cobbler. He likes simple. He also happens to be a federal judge. He stepped into the light with his sleeves rolled up and reading glasses hanging from a cord. "Ma'am," he said to Marla, "what exactly gives you the right to enter this home?" "Who are you?" she demanded. "Someone who reads statutes for a living," he said. And then he looked at me like he was measuring a nail before tapping it true. "You called the sheriff yet?" I had, the minute the door opened, phone in my back pocket on speaker. Small town dispatch knows my voice. They'd said a unit was on the way. You learn to keep records when people test your fences. Marla faltered for the first time. We have an emergency enforcement provision. The judge took one step forward. Emergency means fire, flood, or a threat to life. A porch swing does not qualify. We're on Facebook Live, he said. 200 people watching. Everyone's going to see you lose your house. Everyone's going to see you trespass, I said. And hear you threaten a veteran's memorial flag. That smirk flickered. Marla doubled down. Pay the assessment now, or we start the process to change the locks. Behind her, the lake breeze worked through the pines. The house settled a friendly old creek I know by heart. On the mantel, Dad's flag caught a sliver of porch light and glowed navy. I remembered his hand on my shoulder the day we poured the footing for the front steps. He'd told me, build square. Live square. People will push, son. Hold your line. Headlights swept the windows. Tires crunched gravel. The sheriff's unit rolled to a stop. Blue wash rising and falling across the framed photos like slow water. Deputy Hall stepped in. Hat low, thumbs tucked in his vest. Evening, folks. Got a call about a possible break-in. Good timing, I said. Marla raised her clipboard like a shield. Officer, these residents are in arrears. We have authority to enter to document violations and secure assets. Deputy Hall looked at her, then at me, then at the judge's ID, which he'd slipped from his back pocket like a playing card you only show when asked. Hall's eyebrows climbed his forehead. He knew exactly who was standing in my hallway, ma'am, Hall said. Voice even, I don't see an emergency. I do see a homeowner who asked you to leave, and a federal judge as a guest witness to your entry. You and your associates need to step outside. Phones dropped. Knees knocked invisibly. Marla's mouth worked, but no words came out. I walked to the door, opened it wide, and stepped aside with a hand that said ladies first. My pulse had slowed. That metal taste was gone. I wasn't angry anymore, just settled, clear. On the porch, the night felt cooler. Neighbors' porch lights winked on one by one. I could make out the hum of a TV, the clink of a spoon in a cereal bowl, the things that mark an ordinary life. The judge stood beside me, hands in his pockets, sky reflected in his glasses. Tomorrow, he murmured, let's make some calls. Paper beats theater. Marla glared at the flag as she backed down the steps. This isn't over, she said. That's right, I told her. It's going to be done right. The deputy waited with quiet patience as they retreated to the sidewalk. When the blue lights faded and the night reclaimed its rhythm, Maggie slipped her arm through mine, soft as a whispered prayer. Coffee? She asked. Make it to cups, the judge said with a small smile. We're going to need them. And for the first time in a long while, I felt that old steadiness set in like a level bubble finding center. They'd pushed. I had held the line. Not with shouting. Not with fists. With a doorframe, a deed, a flag, and the cool weight of the law. Tomorrow would be busy. Tonight, the house was ours. By sunrise, the lake lay glass flat, pink and gold, like the good Lord had ironed it. I brewed coffee strong enough to wake the pines and stood on the porch steps where Dad taught me to coil a hose and listen more than speak. The air smelled like wet wood and last night's rain. Across the street, old Mr. Jensen raised his hand from his porch swing to fingers, veteran style. I returned it and went inside to where the judge had my dining table turned into a war room. He'd laid out the binder I'd keep for the property, original deed. Chain of title, survey, exemption letters from when the HOA formed years after my grandparents built here. He'd flagged things with sticky notes and a neat Greenland dates, signatures, the language that mattered. You've been careful, he said. I've had practice, I told him, setting the mug by his elbow. Marla's been at me 3 years now. I file everything. They break off little pieces, trash can inches, grass length, holiday lights. Pecks like a woodpecker. Paper pecks back, he said, and tapped a page. Here's your anchor. Your parcel was expressly excluded when the association recorded its CC&Rs. They can't lien what they don't govern. Maggie came in, towel over her shoulder. They scared the grandkids, she said, voice thin but steady. Last night, Hannah wouldn't go to bed until I checked under her window twice. I kissed her forehead. We'll fix it. We started making calls with the Sun Still Low County Clerk, Recorder's Office, the HOA's registered agent. The judge's voice has a way of calming a room even over the phone. He didn't throw his title like a badge. He simply introduced himself and asked polite, precise questions. Who recorded the lien? On what authority? What notice? What board vote? Please email the minutes. Please produce the enforcement policy. Please confirm your counsel's name. Silence on the other end carries a temperature. Theirs was cold and thin. At 10:30, Deputy Hall knocked again, this time with a small envelope. A certified copy of last night's incident report, he said. Also, we pulled your 911 call. Your timing was spot-on. Appreciate you, I said. He scratched his chin. FYI, the DAS office asked for a heads-up. They've had complaints. Folks afraid to speak on the record. Might want to document everything you can. We printed photos of the front door frame, no damage. Just the latch I'd forgotten to set and stills from my porch camera that showed Marla pushing through with her entourage. Phones up, chin set like she was storming Omaha Beach. We clipped each piece to a manila folder labeled by hour and topic. Paper beats theater. I could feel it. Piece by piece, the story made itself plain. They'd counted on flash and bluff, not law. At noon, I called a meeting. Not a spectacle. Not a spectacle, but I wasn't going to whisper either. I went door to door on my street folks. I've known since they were riding bikes in packs and playing baseball in the park. The Jensens. The Griffins. Missy, who teaches 3rd grade. A pair of new retirees who moved from Ohio. Come by my place at 6, I said. Bring questions. Bring your notices if you've got them. Word travels the way wind does, quietly, everywhere at once. By 5:40, the yard was full of folding chairs and church clothes, casseroles balancing on forearms, nervous laughter under the trees. The judge kept to the back like he always does, friendly but not the center. Maggie passed lemonade and straightened a stack of handouts we'd printed with simple headings. What your deed says, what the HOA can't do, what to do if they try. Marla arrived at 5:59. In a linen blazer with a tight smile and 3 board members in tow, she planted herself at the curb like she owned the asphalt. This is an unauthorized gathering, she announced. I stepped onto my porch to where everyone could hear me without a microphone. This is my front yard, I said. Neighbors are welcome in it. You're welcome too, if you want to listen. She hustled closer. You're spreading misinformation. The board has authority to levy fines and secure the subdivision standards. On your members, I said. Not on exempt parcels. Not by breaking into homes. Not by making up emergencies to justify yourself. Don't pretend you understand the law, she said. I met her eyes, and in that slow porch voice I use when a colt is skittish, I said, ma'am. I've spent a lot of years reading it and more years living under it. So has the gentleman behind you, she turned. The judge had stepped forward, not looming, just present. He held no title up, no threat. He held a folder. Good evening, he said to the group. I'm a guest here, but I've reviewed the records. I'll explain calmly what governs this neighborhood because rumors help no one. Spoke for 10 minutes. He explained deeds and CC&Rs in words a 3rd grader would understand. He drew a box with his finger in the air. That's the association boundary. And pebbled little dots outside. These are the parcels that opted out when it formed. They are not subject to board fines. Not now, not ever, unless the owners volunteer to join. He did not accuse. He did not sway hearts with politics. He simply told the truth. Hands went up. They told me they could tow my truck for parking nose out, Mr. Griffin said. Is that a thing? If your deed makes you a member, you agreed to their parking rules, the judge said. But they can't skip process, and they can't trespass. Missy, the 3rd grade teacher, lifted a flyer she'd been handed last month, threat of lien in bold. They slipped this under my door at midnight, she said. I haven't slept right since. The judge nodded. Liens are tools, not weapons. If they're used to scare, rather than to secure legitimate dues, that's abuse. Document. Call the clerk. Call law enforcement if you're threatened. Marla tried to interrupt. This is slander. But the crowd had shifted. You could feel it. Shoulders squared, spine straightened. A murmur rose, not angry, just steady. I held up my manila folder. Last night, the HOA president entered my home without permission, I said. I have video. I have 2 witnesses. I have the deputy's report. Whatever feud you thought we were having ends now. We're taking this to the county, to the AG's consumer division, and to court if we must. A neighbor I didn't know well, one of the Ohio retirees, spoke up. We got hit with a violation for a wreath that was too seasonal in March. They told us to pay $50 or face a lien. I paid because I didn't want trouble. You're not alone, another said. Me too, whispered someone from the back. It was like listening to a creek under ice. At first a trickle, then a run, then the ice gives, and the water speaks. People weren't mad as much as relieved to finally say it out loud. Marla's smile cracked. We will sue you for defamation, she said, voice climbing an octave. You're free to try, I answered. I'm free to file a verified complaint with exhibits. The judge cleared his throat. No one here is calling for a rush to battle, he said. We are calling for process, transparency, respect. If the board believes a homeowner owes, the board must show its work. If the board crosses lines, the board must answer. At 6:45, Deputy Hall parked at the curb again. No siren, just presence. He waved to me, and I walked over. Evening, Deputy. Evening, he said. Dia's office asked me to deliver this. Handed me an envelope. Notice of inquiry. They're opening a file. You'll hear from an investigator within 48 hours. I nodded and turned so everyone could see it. Paper, process, sunlight. We ended the meeting with lemonade and handshakes. The neighbors lingered to talk not about war, but about mowing schedules, about the church rummage sale, about a lost dog that keeps wandering by. Life, regular life, reclaiming its ground. As the last chair folded, Marla stood alone by the curb, phone to her ear, face tight. She didn't look at the people around her. She looked over them, past them, beyond them, like someone searching for a higher stage when the audience has already decided to go home. On the porch, the judge set his folder down and patted the rail. You did fine, he said. I didn't want a circus, I told him. You didn't have one, he said. You had a neighborhood. Night fell gentle. The flag whispered. The porch light glowed like an ember. Inside, Maggie set the table for supper. I washed my hands in the sink where it all started, and the water ran warm and familiar over knuckles more scarred than they used to be. Sometimes you raise your voice. Sometimes you raise your records. Today, paper beat theater. Tomorrow we'd find out what sunlight does to bullies. 48 hours later, right on the nose, the investigator called. Not a headline chaser, a listener. She asked for what we had, thanked us for being organized, and scheduled interviews with a string of neighbors whose knees had quit knocking. I don't promise outcomes, she said, only process. That was enough for me. I don't need anyone marched through town square. I need folks to stop being afraid of their own front porches. Words spread about the inquiry. The HOA board posted a statement online about misunderstandings and malicious actors. It read like it had been drafted by someone who's never stood in a driveway and apologized to a neighbor. They called our meeting illegal. They called our documents cherry-picked. I poured coffee and kept scanning receipts. Then the first twist. A former board secretary messaged the investigator and turned over emails, dozens of them where Marla directed expedited enforcement against non-compliant holdouts and suggested creating urgency with after-hours notices. She had told her inner circle to test the limits because courts are slow and most people fold. In reading those words, felt like watching a storm build over dry grass. Another twist? The lien they'd recorded on my parcel had the wrong legal description, fatally wrong. It referenced a lot on the far side of the subdivision, one that belonged to a widow named Dolores, who keeps roses so precise she trims with nail scissors. They'd stapled my name to her land, sloppy, dangerous proof that their theater troupe hadn't read its script. The investigator asked me to come down to the county building and bring the judge along if he was willing. We sat in a room with a flickering fluorescent light and a jar of mismatched pens. I told the story the way I'd lived it, in short sentences, straight lines, no venom. The judge spoke only when asked, precise as a plumb bob. Did you use your office to influence action? The investigator asked him. No, he said, and looked her in the eye with the kind of humility you don't fake. I used my eyes to read what anyone could read, and my voice as a neighbor to say what was plain. Meanwhile, in the neighborhood, something shifted. People started waving again. The couple from Ohio turned their chairs toward the street. Mr. Jensen sanded his front steps, whistling an old tune. The little boy 2 houses down rode his scooter in long, looping figure eights. I hadn't realized how quiet we had all become until the normal sounds came: back screen doors, porch laughs, a radio playing Patsy Cline from somebody's garage. Then came the board meeting. They scheduled it at the clubhouse on a Tuesday, a time that used to guarantee nobody showed. But folks came on their lunch breaks, with toddlers on hips, with printouts of their deeds and highlighted lines. The judge chose not to attend. Your house, your street, your voices, he said. I'll be at the diner with a book. Maggie and I walked in and took seats at the back. Marla sat at the head of a long table, gavel near her hand like a prop. I watched her scan the room and saw what she saw. Not a mob, not a revolt. Just a crowd of people who had stopped whispering and started reading. The first agenda item was compliance updates. She gave a speech about standards and property values. It didn't land. Then came public comment. Dolores the widow with the roses walked to the microphone in a denim jacket and white tennis shoes. She is 5 feet of politeness and steel. Ma'am, she said to the board, I wondered why I got a letter that said I owed $7,000 when I have never in 41 years missed a due date. Turns out you put someone else's name on my lot. I brought cookies to the office 3 times and never got a call back. That's no way to be a neighbor. A murmur rose. Not angry, wounded, then Mr. Griffin, then Missy, then the Ohio couple. One by one, stories like small stones placed in a common pile. No shouting, no name-calling. Just sunlight. When it was my turn, I kept it short. You came into my house, I said, looking at Marla. You looked at my father's flag and called it a violation. You recorded my wife like a trophy. A deputy told you to leave. You posted a lie about me online. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to say it stops now. Marla tapped the gavel. We don't recognize comments that accuse without evidence. A dozen hands lifted copies of the deputy's report. Paper rustled like leaves. A board member 2 seats down leaned toward his mic. He'd always seemed decent, overruled at meetings, outvoted when common sense tried to breathe. Madam President, he said carefully, I move we rescind the lien notices issued in the last 6 months, pause enforcement activities pending audit, and invite the DAS office to review our procedures. Silence. You could hear the soda machine hum. Marla's eyes flashed. Out of order. Another board member cleared her throat. I second. Her hands trembled a little, but her chin was up. Marla raised the gavel, then froze when she realized every phone in the room was filming. She swallowed, set the gavel down, and called a vote. The motion passed, 3-2. She stared at the ceiling so long, I thought she might invent a leak. When we stepped outside, the sky had that clean blue you only see after rain. People clapped shoulders and exhaled like they'd been holding breath for a year. Dolores pressed a Tupperware container into my hands. Lemon bars with powdered sugar. For your judge, she said, and for your Maggie. 2 days later, the board posted a notice. Emergency election next month. Independent audit retained. Cooperation with the DA. They called it good governance. I call it what happens when regular people remember their names and their rights. As for Marla, I heard she stepped down for personal reasons. I don't celebrate that. I don't need her punished to feel whole. I just need a town where a porch is a porch and a flag is a flag and a neighbor knocks before walking in. That evening, I sat on the steps with a fresh cup of coffee and watched the lake settle. The judge came out with a lemon bar and a smile. "Quiet justice," he said. "That's the best kind," I replied. He nodded toward Dad's flag. "Your father would have liked tonight." "He liked straight lines," I said, "and people who kept their word." We didn't say much after that. The light got soft. The dog snored under the rail. Somewhere down the street, a kid laughed. The kind of laugh that tells you tomorrow's going to be fine. Here's what I learned, and maybe it'll mean something to you too. Sometimes standing up for what's right doesn't look like a fight. It looks like a file folder, a deep breath, and a room full of neighbors deciding fear doesn't live here anymore. If you've ever had an HOA or any bully lean on your doorbell in your spirit, tell us your story in the comments. I read every word. And if you believe front porches and family flags are worth protecting, hit subscribe. We'll stand up together quietly, firmly, and all the way to the line.